As they say in hockey, let's do that hockey.
Play a full 60 minutes.
Yeah, I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Get pucks deep, putting the puck deep.
Put pucks in deep.
We got to keep it simple and just get pucks going forward.
Getting into the forecheck.
We got to keep playing aggressive.
Trying to take away their time and space.
We're focused on tonight. We just got to stick to our game.
The playoffs are rolling on. We're down to 4 teams. The Carolina Hurricanes are one of them. 3 people on the show. One of them is Matthew Mugno. Welcome back, buddy. Unfortunately, one of the 4 teams is not his team, the New York Rangers, who were eliminated long ago. The first time he's showed face to talk about it. Jake Swanson on as well. I'm Casey Ditzel. We welcome you back to the Fifth Liners podcast, our conference final preview. Very excited, but first let's run it around here. Gentlemen, how's everybody been? Matthew, long time no see. What's been going on? You've been all over the lacrosse world voicing Army.
Yeah, so I'm popping my head out of the foxhole finally. It took a long time to muster that. Lacrosse world is great. Army got snubbed out of their NCAA tournament for the men's side. Women's side, they got in, didn't win their qualifying match. So it was good all around. It's great to be part of history and up at the military academy. But hockey-wise, it's really difficult seeing 3 of 4 teams returning to the conference final, and you know exactly why. New York did not, but that's not why we're here today. I'm ready to talk about everything but New York.
Jake, last episode we talked to Stephanie Markowski. She's on the move heading to the championship, and for the 2 of us that are Clarkson Golden Knights fans, it's pretty much a dream scenario. Ottawa and Minnesota. How have you been enjoying the PWHL?
I've been enjoying it a lot, Casey. It's a lot of really fun games. Both series went to 4 games, which was nice. It was back and forth. There was no sweeps. And also the goaltenders, we'll get into it later, but oh my God, both in the NHL and the PWHL, the goaltenders have been kind of my favorite people to watch in these playoff series. So excited to keep it going for the conference finals and the Walter Cup finals. So it's going to be a fun end of May right here.
We're going to recap the second round of the Stanley Cup playoffs, give our predictions and breakdowns of the 2 remaining matchups for the Eastern and Western Conference Finals, and then Jake is going to tell us all about what's going on around the PWHL to close off the show. Let's get into it here, and we'll start with our round 2 recap. And how can you not start with the most exciting of them? Game 7, and in true Toronto Maple Leafs fashion, they get booed off the ice and booed off home ice in Game 7, a 2-0 series lead. They had already planned the parade just about. Paul Bissonnette leading the way, and all of a sudden, bang, 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 it's 3-2 Florida. They bring it back to Toronto. The hopes are back up, and could not have laid a harder egg there. 6-1 back-to-back on home ice were the losses in Games 5 and Game 7. Toronto now 0-7 in Game 7 since 2013. 5 of those 7 have come at the hands of Brad Marchand, a 3-point night for him, finishing it off with an empty net goal with 1 goal and 2 assists. Paul Maurice advances to 5-0 in Game 7. And guys, what stands out to you most? The epic collapse of the Toronto Maple Leafs, the inherent dominance of the defending Stanley Cup champion Florida Panthers, who look very scary going into this conference final, or a little bit of everything?
Jake, I'll let you start.
Okay, yeah. I think it shows to me that Toronto is one of the hardest places to play as a NHL player, and it's no surprise an original 6 team, and that fan base is diehard. But you think about here, like in the States, where you talk about New York, Boston, Philly, like those really hard markets to play in, and this just shows to me that Toronto's right up there with them, and it's so tough to see Marner and Matthews giving it so much the entire season. And then this is how they get rewarded for a very close series against a very good team. So I am worried for the future of Toronto. I think they've always said, like, oh, yeah, next year's our year. Then they do what they do against the Bruins in the first round for however many years. And then they finally get to round 2 this year. They have a really good shot at putting it away, and they just can't do it. So whether it's a management change, whether it's a personnel change, it looks like Marner might be leaving, and whether it's a goaltending change. I mean, Joseph Woll, he's not exactly your a stud goaltender that you want to rely on for the future. He's great, don't get me wrong, but I mean, you look at the other side and you get Sergei Bobrovsky, or you look in the Western Conference and you had Hellebuck and Ottinger duking it out in the second round. So it's definitely interesting to see where this team's going to go. But Toronto, man, I just booing off the home ice is just a bad look for me. I get that you're really pissed off at this team, but it just doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah, you know what, Casey? I don't think that, and Jake, I don't think that was the bad look. I think that was the last look we'll see of this group. Mitch Marner, I think for how the Rantanen situation, how that resulted, I think the fan base has the right to be frustrated. Now, granted, at that time, you're saying to yourself, this team looks different. They're bought into Berube's coaching style, very in your face, a more aggressive nature on the ice and in the system that he established. But at the end of the day, a flower's going to wilt in 100-degree weather. And that's what we saw for Marner. And I think for Matthews, I know Casey in our notes has the quote, and it's certainly circled its way around social media. I don't know if you guys are baseball guys. It kind of gives me like the Soto vibes from the Subway series where like you can't look checked out in that situation. It's just not necessarily like not just a bad look, but like probably the worst look you could like worst situation you could be in. I also think for the Maple Leafs, there is a sliver of hope that Matthew Knies really showed up. And I also think what's frustrating for that fan base is the turnstile of depth pieces that actually contributed when the core four has not. Like Max Domi, I thought had a great playoff run this year in the 2 rounds they played in. Matthew Knies. And again, we're talking about the same 4 players, which quite honestly, I didn't even realize Morgan Riley was in the series, much less a factor. So listen, to me, if Austin Matthews, the man who had 60 goals a few seasons back, isn't hitting the back of the net in those crucial games, especially Game 7, you also have to think about how they contribute otherwise. And I think that's what strikes me the most is Matthew Tkachuk on the other side did not have a great series, but what he did was have an impact elsewhere. So that's what you're looking for. And, at the end of the day, I can't say I'm not surprised, but they always do it in the most bizarre fashion.
That was a game I did not expect at all. On my other show, I was pounding the drum of betting the under and looking at Joseph Woll in elimination games. The guy's been dominant, and it goes to an average of about a .955 save percentage over the 5 elimination games he had previously played in. Sergei Bobrovsky lived up to the expectation, just 1 goal against there. But, man, there was no life in that Toronto offense. And I want to go to exactly, Matthew, what you were just talking about, the core 4, and exactly on the point of this is the last time we're going to see this group. You're getting nothing for Marner, who's going to walk. And he made it sounded pretty evident from his presser there. There's no chance he's going to be back, and just about saying goodbye to the Leafs faithful, and it's been an honor or whatever. But you can expect that he's going to be gone. My question, let's start it off here on the first of the core 4. If you're Marner, why in the world would fans expect him to come back? That he's been treated like dirt. He's been scrutinized for a guy. Sure, he hasn't performed necessarily in the postseason. None of them really have that. You could say the same thing, but he's always been the guy that gets ripped to shreds to the point that they're tweeting out his home address, a guy who now is a newborn baby. I would be terrified to live in Toronto, nonetheless have any want to go back if I was Marner right now.
Yeah, it really speaks again to that diehard fan base and how it can be a great thing and it can be a terrible thing too. And the only like fathomable reason that I think I would want to return if I was Mitch Marner is if Toronto magically like signed every top end free agent they could this offseason, including him, and put together the likes of a super team. Can Matt, to your point of like baseball analogies, like the LA Dodgers and what they did with Otani, Freeman, Betts. Like if they do that, then maybe, but man, I think it's just time for him to reset somewhere else, change of scenery. I know our friend Panos from Puck Empire put out his top team lists of where Marner should go. He had Chicago at number 1, which I was I was definitely interested in that. I think I like his number 2 better in Utah. I think him on that forward core would be really, really cool. But yeah, I just don't see him even entertaining the thought of a contract extension with the Leafs, and it's Toronto's fault. It really is. Like, yes, again, like Casey said, he hasn't performed in the playoffs, but I just give the guy some kind of a break. Like, gosh, he's still a top 20 player in the game of hockey, and he's done so much for that city. He's put his body out on the line. He's done so many things for them, and this is just a tough way to go.
I don't know where you stand, Casey. I'm on the other side of the fence with Marner, like completely. I have been for a few years. To me, and Jake, I appreciate where you're coming from. I think that if you're the Toronto fan base, you know how Svechnikov, Casey, your Canes guy, has finally stepped into that role, and he's really starting to score in the playoffs. How old is he now? 25?
24, 25. He's right around the same
24?
age I am, so maybe just turned 25.
Right? Marner's a few years older. Like, I think in 2021, that was where it first set in, like, all right, where's this core 4 thing going? That's 4 years ago now. Like, these guys have been around the block. Marner, 0 goals in Game 7s. Now, even if we're not talking about production, he hit his 100-point season this year in the regular season, but that's not where your name gets etched in stone forever. It gets etched in the cup forever if you show up in the playoffs. So I do think that as much as he can do, he could be the most charitable man. Regular season gets them to that place. But for a team that has higher expectations than just reaching the playoffs, I understand that at this point in his career, I think from the organization standpoint, it's time to move on. I think for the player, I certainly respect that for the flack he's taken, he has the option to leave, and I think he needs that refresher too. We see it all over hockey. A guy goes somewhere else, caco, and they start performing well. This is to another level, and I think there are certainly destinations that desire his talents. But a team like Chicago and Utah, he's getting them from regular season play to the playoffs. But at this point for the Maple Leafs, they're trying to get from round 2 to Stanley Cup final. They're not trying to get from outside looking in. So I personally stand on the other side of that conversation, but I do agree that with how things have gone from the personal level and for how things have gone in the last few years, for the criticisms he's taken, like his talents are certainly desired elsewhere.
I'm interested to see. I could see him, while you talk about Svechnikov, I could see Marner in a Hurricanes jersey next year. And I'm not sure something as a fan I would be too excited about, but they made the offer to make a big trade for him around the Rantanen deal, and Marner didn't want to use his no move clause to go there. Now, if he can get a big bag, they have a ton of cap space. I could see that. How about, I would love to see him go to Boston. I want him to stay in division somewhere 4 times a year. He can give the business in the regular season when he's so good. Maybe a team like Buffalo that needs top-notch talent. But, I don't like the way that the fan base has treated him at all. I would be more on the Jake side. I see, you need to have a little bit more production for the money he wants. If he's going to get $14 million or whatever his ask is going to be, I don't think he's worth that at all right now. but I completely disagree with the scrutiny. I wouldn't go anywhere near going back to Toronto if I was him. That's the reason I would pick just about as close as I could get to it in a spot that in 3 or 4 years could be beating the Toronto Maple Leafs. All right, let's close it off on the Toronto Florida series here. Last core 4 touches. So presuming Marner doesn't come back, they could have had a big return if they trade him. They get nothing for him. Tavares with an expiring contract closing in on 35, 36 years old. Matthews and Nylander on their longer term contracts struggled to make any impact, and Nylander's defensive effort has been under high scrutiny. You mentioned the quote. Matthews postgame says that the Leafs, quote, had a lot of passengers on the team during Game 7. Across the core 4, is there anybody that you guys are pleased with that you would want going forward with your franchise? And for me, I thought it was a glaring lack of disconnect on the Matthews quote, where he did not produce at all either on that Game 7, and he's, as the captain, saying that has to come from that leadership group. And you see Marner screaming at the bench. None of those guys did anything, in my opinion, to deserve being able to stand on a podium and go after the rest of their team for a lack of production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Matt, I'll defer to you for this one because I've got thoughts, but I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree. I mean, Scott Lawton and Lorentz have your breakaway opportunities to start the game. They were probably their better chances to score throughout a Game 7. I agree. And I also think something from the outside, though, we talked about, you guys mentioned the media, the criticisms. I do feel that the transition was a little bit odd, and obviously these people are all in situations or they are all in positions to be prepared. They were prepared for moving the C from Tavares to Matthews, knowing that Tavares, he might be gone after this season. They wanted a captain to be instituted that would be there long term. They thought it was that time, pass the torch, kind of an awkward situation. But all of the people there, the personnel that were involved, were all aware. Like, we know that there were plenty of conversations around this. It didn't just happen. With that stated, it is Austin Matthews' first season with the C. So I'm going to play devil's advocate on this one and say I do think that quote has been scrutinized, and I don't think that he was excluding himself from that passenger statement. Like, I don't think he was saying, I'm driving the bus and everyone else is, passengers. I just think it was certainly the poor choice of words after that performance, series, playoff, you name it. But at the same time, for someone that moments ago was coming down on Marner, that has to be shared with Matthews. I do think that there is a little bit of room to grow for his maturity as the captain, and to learn the proper things. Sometimes it takes a mistake to understand, how you should communicate with the media and go about it this summer and work on that aspect of wearing the C, especially in the city of Toronto. I'm playing devil's advocate, but I'm sure you guys are on the other side of this one, but I'm interested to hear what you have to say, Jake.
Actually, I agree with that, Matt. I think it gets so overblown, a lot of the quotes that they have, especially after such an emotional game. Game 7 on home ice, and then you get booed off the ice by your home fans. Like, so much has to be running through your minds after getting done with that. And, I mean, yeah, first year with the C, and I mean, he's got great mentors in Tavares, who's worn the C for a long time. I mean, and then in the trade deadline, they get Scott Lawton, who's worn an A for Philly for a while. And it's just, I think you're right. He just has to understand what it means to be speaking with that C on his chest, and understand that the media is going to put a lot more weight into those words. But yeah, going back to like Casey's original question of like, is there any one of the core 4 that I was pleased with? The answer is pretty simple. It's not really. I mean, again, Matthews and Marner didn't really show up during that. And then Nylander, his defensive ability has been kind of called into question. I'm not sure where he's going to stand on that. Like, obviously, he's not going to be one of your PK guys, but I mean, at least make a second, third, fourth effort on the defensive end. And with Tavares, like, I don't know. I think he's just tired, man. I mean, he came to Toronto expecting to win a cup, and all he's gotten are a bunch of first round exits, and this second round exit is probably the closest he's been since he was down in Tampa. And I don't know, man. It's a tough situation for those four, and with Tavares probably being gone, it's going to be really hard to find that leader right behind Matthews that can kind of be his number two and prop him up. Because, I mean, if you lose Marner, you lose Tavares, who's going to be his number two leadership guy? I mean, is it going to be Morgan Riley? Are we confident in that? It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So hoping that Toronto this offseason can make a couple of big splashes. So hopefully not Nashville Predators big splashes. Hopefully it's actually impactful. But yeah, it's an interesting thing to talk about. But yeah, let's get to the more important matchup in Casey's eyes, the Carolina-Washington matchup.
Good call. We've been long-winded there on the Leafs, and we'll move on, but something we'll talk plenty in depth about throughout the offseason. A lot to cover on the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Carolina and Washington, a 5-game series, and a pretty dominant performance by the Carolina Hurricanes. Starting with the Capitals, the magical season comes to an end. A team most people discounted even from the playoff picture going into this one after they were just dominated by the Rangers last year. But 111 points, first in the Eastern Conference, second overall in the NHL. They complete the great chase. Alex Ovechkin misses a month, comes back, the third overall scorer or goal scorer in the NHL without a month of playtime. Outstanding. What impressed you guys most about Washington before we go to Carolina?
I think it's got to be just how resilient that team is. And I mean, the additions that they made in the offseason, I really liked how they got so much out of Logan Thompson and Charlie Lindgren. And it's a tandem that's such a good tandem, like in real life, not so much on paper. Like going into the season, I mean, Thompson had a couple of years with the Vegas Golden Knights where he was a good starting goaltender, and Charlie Lindgren as well was pretty good for Washington, but neither of them had really hit that ceiling for a top starting goaltender. And this year, Thompson was, I think, like 20-3 in his first like 24 starts, and had over a 910 save percentage. Like, he deservedly got that extension towards the trade deadline this year. And then on the offensive side, I mean, you've got guys like Ovi, but also like TJ Oshie, who have kind of recaptured that magic and were actually very, very impactful down the stretch. And so just the consistency towards the end, and the fact that they were so resilient, especially when a lot of media outlets were calling them like just a shell of Alexander Ovechkin and just trying to feed him the puck. They were so much more than that this season.
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most is I don't think Washington is in the conversation enough about youth development, prospect development, drafting. Protus, I thought he for sure could be a Selke candidate. Obviously a right winger, mostly goes to center, guys with a little more experience. But if I had a vote, which obviously I don't for many reasons, but if I had a vote, I would love to toss one his way, especially for that finalist spot. Like, he is everything and more you could ask for. Size, he plays the game pretty safe. He's really good stick check speed. 6'6". You can't ask for more. They have size in their lineup, but they don't play slow. I think they played the one team that really can expose that in you, moving the puck faster than the man, and also just having a really conditioned team in Carolina. But you name it, Strome, brought in from Chicago. He seemed like kind of a retread project. Protus, drafted late round. there are a bunch of players on that squad that are younger. They stepped into roles that I didn't think many anticipated that they'd not only take and learn from, but like seize their opportunity. So I would like to see as things move along, and I think we'll see it more in the summer, that I think the organization deserves a lot of stick taps for how well they've done, not only this year, but the last few years with that. Recall before the Jacob Vrana kind of in and out of the league situation, he was a major factor in their Stanley Cup championship. So I do like to see how they get their players to that next level, especially on the young side. So they've had that old core that you just alluded to, right? Like that Shell Ovi, like these players that are well beyond their prime. But the infusion of youth, I think, really picked them up. And from seeing where they were at last year, a player like Connor McMichael, he played well against the Rangers, but didn't really produce, having an 80-point season. It's really cool to see that for Washington. So I really admired how their youth stepped up, not only in the regular season, but the playoffs.
Bright future there for sure. Cole Hudson still coming down the line from BU there. They get Ryan Leonard into the mix, and he gets some playoff experience to go forward in Washington. Maybe Ovechkin is not the end of the line there as we look forward. Carolina, though, able to take care of him, and the physicality of Washington that they used to get through the first round, really dominate over the Montreal Canadiens, seemed like the factor that was going to set them over the edge. They were the favorites going into this series against Carolina, and Carolina pretty much bullied them around, limiting the shot count, dominating the possession. The defense shined in round 2, holding the Capitals to just 7 goals in the 5 games played. The penalty kill has been close to perfect. That's the real, key factor for Carolina, as well as the power play right now that is rocking up there, the number 4 team in the postseason on the power play after being just 25th in the NHL throughout the regular season. Andrei Svechnikov, a player you brought up earlier, leading the team in goals. He has 8 in 10 games played, and personally my favorite player in the NHL. A lot of that just because I'm a Carolina Hurricanes fan. But honestly, going into this postseason, a player, and as a fan, somebody I was very nervous about in thinking that he's had some injury problems, had not really been an impact player in a really rough season, wasn't making much noise. He'd been up and down the line chart, as low as playing on the 4th line for a couple of games. And it is great to see him heating up here, but that's just what Carolina needs. Thinking back to where they've gotten knocked out in past years, it's been because of the offense, and going back to the Rangers knocking them out last year, the offense just dried up. If Svechnikov can keep playing at the level he has, that could be the factor that gets them over the hump here. What impressed you the most about Carolina through these first couple of rounds, and specifically round 2 against Washington?
Casey, I think that what you said about Svechnikov from New York side, the New York fan base, at least the Rangers, they don't have a fear of Svechnikov and Aho as they did in 2008, 2009 when Alex Ovechkin would come on the ice. Yeah, he's 24 years old, but he's going to burn you, because we didn't see that before. So I had a lot of doubt coming into this playoff, because it seemed like if Svechnikov isn't really performing to that level in the same way we talked about the core 4, it felt like, how is this team going to get to the Stanley Cup final? Like they can do it, but that success in the Eastern Conference final, it seems like it's because Aho, Svechnikov, the later it got, all of a sudden, like you mentioned, it seemed like the offense dried up. But I've been incredibly impressed with how Svechnikov has handled himself. He's clearly taken his game to another level all around. That's what contributes to the goal scoring. And I'm happy to eat my words on him. I really thought that Aho and Svechnikov were again going to tail off as the playoff went on, and yet I found that they were the reason that they were able to get to this point, reach the conference final, and I think I'm a little more confident in their game in this conference final than in years past. So, Jake, I know I flew in there with, Svech talk, but that's been something I've talked about a lot online and on my show, and it is nice to see a star player for Carolina really come through and see that player go from grassroots to really growing into like a key player.
Yeah, and I agree. I think Svech, he's going to be the X factor in this Eastern Conference final. And if he can get going just like he did in the second round, it's going to be a tough test for Florida to shut him down. So, and on my end, looking at just pure analytics and stats, I really liked what they did with the center core. And I mean, out of the main four centers that have been taking draws, minus Jesperi Kotkaniemi, everybody's above 50% in the faceoff dot, which is pretty impressive, especially with the tough tests that they faced. And our boy Nico Sturm is going to have a little bit of a hard test in that dot, but I mean, Jack Roslovic, 57.5%, Mark Jankowski, 55.2%, Sebastian Aho, 54.2%, Jordan Stahl, 52.6%. And I mean, it's kind of insane that they could keep this up. And I mean, Kotkaniemi is not even that far behind. He's right at about 45% in the dot. So really happy with how they did and controlling the puck, controlling the faceoffs. And also on the other end, on the blue line, I mean, Jacob Slavin is slowly becoming one of my favorite players in the NHL. I had really not put much thought into him until the Four Nations face-off earlier this year. And then just seeing how he played for Team USA, it's really gotten me to like a lot of parts of his game, especially the blocked shots on the blue line. So I think they've got a very deep team, which we were really kind of confused about their depth coming to the trade deadline when Ditz and I were talking more about like who's Carolina going to target and who are they going to get. We were really worried about their center depth after they traded Rantanen and Drury to Dallas, and I think they've really shown that their depth is there and that they can do it. I mean, Logan Stankoven, who they got from Dallas, I mean, in 15 and a half minutes on ice per game, he's gotten 5 points. And I mean, that's nothing to sneer at. So I'm really excited to see how they continue to do in this Eastern Conference final.
Edmonton is the last
AC,
hope
we
right
got to
now.
ask you though. I mean,
Yep.
you're the Carolina guy. You tell us what you saw from your angle. I mean, you were there.
I mean, right now, exceptionally pleased, and I was slightly hoping for a Toronto Maple Leafs conference final appearance because I think that was the clear path forward for the Hurricanes to make the Cup final. In my bracket, I have Edmonton and Florida, and I just think Florida with the depth, with the experience, I think that's a much tougher test. But man, they've answered every question. I had doubts that they were going to be able to get past Washington, or for that matter, even make it a 7-game series, and they wiped those away quickly. Right now, the team's pretty healthy. They've got the kid Nikishin that just stepped in and pretty much shut down Ovechkin. That's being compared to a Cal Makar style player out of Russia. We were joking about it before we started recording. This is the most confident I've felt going into a conference final as a Canes fan, probably since they won it in 2006. And that was the year I bandwagoned and became a fan. And honestly, don't really remember it other than that all my neighbors are diehard Sabres fans. They beat the Sabres in the conference final. I said, yep, that's my team. But it's hard not to have confidence here. And funny enough, going into the season, this was the year that I had the least amount of confidence in the Hurricanes. But we'll wait and see. I think the tough thing is going to be that Florida has the physicality. Florida, can kind of match the four lines that they roll, which is a huge strength Carolina has. We'll talk about that a little bit coming up in our series preview, but I think there's a good chance for Carolina, and again, probably the best that they've looked. It's also a major advantage. They've only played 10 games. They've gotten both these series done in 5. There's a good chance that I think we could see them, maybe even a rematch as we're going over to the West here, of the 2006 Cup that they lifted. Edmonton is the last chance for a Canadian team to bring the cup home this year. They beat Vegas, quick work as well, a 5-game set. And after losing the first 2 games of the playoffs to LA, the Oilers have won 8 of the last 9, 2 stretches of 4 straight wins. They won in 6 in the first round, dropped game 1, and then won in 5 against Vegas. Where do you guys want to start here? We could go with the injuries to Vegas and the question marks of what that really did. Mark Stone, obviously a pretty big one, but I don't think it really would have mattered. Stuart Skinner's comeback was a huge story where he was pretty much dead to rights. All of a sudden, Pickard gets hurt. He comes back and shuts out Vegas back-to-back games to finish this one up. We can also talk a little bit about the Oilers' depth scoring, the defensive buy-in. I'll let you guys pick and choose where you want to go with it. Jake, if you want to kick us off.
I think Casey knows me well enough. I think he knows where I'm going to go with this. But the goaltending, I mean, first of all, big props to Calvin Pickard. I mean, he hasn't really been an impactful starter in the NHL ever. I mean, he got his most starts, I think, this year. And he comes in when Stuart Skinner isn't doing the best and gets hurt. And he basically steadies the boat for the Oilers and says, hey, we're still a good team. You guys give me good D in front of it and I'll do a job. It won't be the flashiest, but we will get it done. And then when he gets hurt, Skinner says, okay, hey, my turn. And he shuts him out back to back. And he's looking like that Stuart Skinner that got the Oilers to the Stanley Cup final last year. So I'm really impressed with them, and hopefully they can keep it going. But, I mean, I just love to root for Stuart Skinner and that beautiful mustache of his.
The only thing I can really add to this conversation is that Vegas sold my bracket. So I had them, all the way Stanley Cup champion. And against Minnesota, Jake, before we got on air here, you had mentioned you had a lot of faith in Minnesota, but I don't think that was a result of Vegas playing poorly. I think Minnesota played Vegas really well. Yeah, I do think Vegas played Edmonton poorly because I still am not sold on Edmonton's depth. I would like to see them match up against Dallas. The reason being, I don't think Vegas really brought their A game against the Oilers. I thought a lot of those comeback efforts were kickstarted by 97-29. Overtime goal, 97-29. So I do not want to discredit what Edmonton has done as a full team. They've really come together, which has surprised everyone in the hockey world based on where they were at coming into the playoffs, start of the playoffs. But I do think moving forward, it's going to be interesting to see where they lie. I'm still not convinced that their depth against a true contender, a team that is, I think, come forward as like that true contender, where they stand, because I do think in a lot of ways Vegas didn't get the same production from some of their top players and some players that aren't considered top NHL players. Eichel, certainly. His two-way game, it was great. It still felt like it wasn't enough. Their defense certainly, I think, was not enough. Jake, you mentioned goaltending. Hill, you have to wonder if the Vegas pundits are questioning the Thompson move. I think many people are, but I feel like that's certainly at the forefront of the conversation now. So I do think there's a little bit of back and forth. I feel I've seesawed a little bit in this conversation, but overall, I do think the engine starts with the two stars in Edmonton, two of the best players, if not the best players in the NHL. And I'm not convinced on their depth, but I'm curious to hear what you guys think about that.
Yeah, it's interesting because McDavid and Draisaitl really carried the boat to get them into the second round, honestly, through the first couple of games of this one, but cooled off there towards the end. Draisaitl went a couple games, 3 games without a goal. McDavid didn't have a goal until game 5, and he went 4 games without a goal. Just the second time this season that he had a stretch of 4 games, no goals. Picked one up there in the 5th game, but I think those are the two key factors, the two guys that really got him to the Cup final last year. And then in the Cup final, to drag him back, it was the third and fourth lines, the shorthanded goal stretch that they went on that was unbelievable. Some of those things that we saw flashes of in this series that I don't think they had in the 6-game win against LA, where if that can continue to get stronger and stronger, similar to Florida. I didn't think Florida looked, too great in the first round, the first couple games against the Leafs, but all of a sudden in that 3-game stretch where they won 3 in a row, they were snapping it around the offensive zone, and flares of what this team could look like that they put together at the trade deadline, Seth Jones' legacy game in Game 7 there. I think that's kind of what we started to see out of Edmonton, maybe putting it together. They've shuffled the lines a lot. You get Skinner and Arvidsson in the press box sitting and watching, which imagine on July 1st thinking about the fact that they signed Jeff Skinner and Victor Arvidsson, who are their big gets, and then saying, oh yeah, you're going to be playing in the conference final, and those two guys are going to be healthy scratches this year. That is kind of an outrageous thing to think about, but I think it also, factors to how impressive it is that they were able to move on. Sure, I will agree. Vegas did not look great, and maybe that goes a little bit back to Mark Stone being out specifically in Game 5. Definitely a detrimental injury. Pietrangelo and McNabb both a little bit banged up, so the defense wasn't 100%. But you got to wonder what Vegas is going to look like going forward too. They didn't have a great offseason. They didn't really go out and get much, and now they're kind of getting towards that regression from the Stanley Cup. We'll have to see what they can do in the offseason. The last team that made it in, who Edmonton will be playing, is Dallas. They get past Winnipeg in 6 games. And let's start with Mark Scheifele, the terrible news that came out right before Game 7 that his father had passed away unexpectedly the night before. What a warrior Mark Scheifele is. He decides to stick with his team. He plays the game. Not only that, but kicks off the game with the game's opening goal, putting the Jets on the board. Unfortunately, the Jets lose in overtime. He's the one that takes the penalty, but you see immediately how tight that Jets team is. His whole team going straight over to him, and the post-game press conferences talking about how they're a family. They weren't going to let him walk away. Some pretty harrowing stuff from the Jets side, but our thoughts obviously with the Scheifele family and an impressive effort out of him to go out and have that performance after such a devastating tragedy.
Yeah, and I was watching this one live in a Cleveland bar, and it was definitely just so insane to see. I mean, it's so interesting to me. We see this all the time in sports, and unfortunately, a lot of it comes after a tragedy. But it just seems like there's something that, I don't know, something supernatural or something that just feels like his father was with him that game. And it was really tough to see him take that penalty. I mean, it was a tough one, partial break, and he just needed to take Sam Steele down to stop the breakaway. And we were talking in the group chat too of like that could have been a penalty shot as well. It's up to the referee's discretion for that, and thanks to our friend George for that nice analysis, because I wasn't too sure. I haven't seen a lot of penalty shots in my time, but it was such a tough way for Winnipeg to go out, and I was definitely impressed with both of the goaltenders, but I think Dallas definitely did enough to secure this, and I think they're going to be a real tough test for the Oilers, especially in the way they play. So I'm interested to see how Edmonton matches up and see. I think this is it could be either a sweep on the Dallas side, or it could go all the way to 7 games. And I'm even saying if it goes to 7 games, I think we'll see another overtime. So it's one of those series that if Dallas gets off on the right foot, I think they could do some huge damage to the Oilers. But on the other end, Edmonton has found the weaknesses in both of their opponents. So I'm interested to see how they play Dallas.
We'll get to the goaltending, and Jake, I'll let you throw your thoughts in there. But first, on the offensive side, and Matthew, I'll have you cover the offense. It's been the show of the fantastic Finns. Granlund has 7 points through the first 12 games. Hintz 10 points through the first 12. Rantanen with 19 through 12. 2 of them have been hat tricks for Rantanen. He's the Conn Smythe favorite. And Granlund picked up the Game 4 hat trick that put Dallas in the driver's seat. What has impressed you most? And depth was the thing that we just talked about, and you think it's to Dallas's advantage here going forward. A couple guys, obviously, the hockey community is going to root for, and Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin trying to get to the top of the mountain, get their first Stanley Cup. They're big pieces of the offense here. And then obviously Rantanen is the piece that has all of a sudden exploded. He didn't do anything after the trade in Carolina. They move him on. Didn't do much during the end of the regular season in Dallas. 0 points in the first 2 games of the playoffs and 19 since then.
Well, holy smokes. Let's talk about so many things fire off when you think about the depth of a team. And the Stars feel like that where, oh, okay, Rantanen. Like there was that whole saga. Obviously, you're well aware of that. The whole hockey community is, and I think it's getting to the point where most sports fans are outside of the game. Now in Dallas, and not just having 1 or 2 monster performances. I mean, this is a generational run he's on. On top of that, his line mate, you think Jim Nill is sweating that first round pick he traded for Granlund? Not at all. Cody Ceci also playing pretty well. And then it just continues. You mentioned that line of Ben, Seguin, and Duchesne. I mean, all 3 guys feel like it feels like Corey Perry, where it's like you can't believe they're at this point in their career. They're still getting by and doing a pretty darn good job of it. I think they produced, but also created quality chances, which I think for some of the teams you criticized, we didn't see that from those players. And we're seeing it from players that, does Sagan's contract have justification? Not anymore, but it's been years of that. Jamie Benn, $9 million. Maybe a little bit tough to justify in some markets or if he was underperforming, but they do so many intangibles on top of creating quality chances. And then you get to the fact that Miro Heiskanen is now healthy and he was zooming in Game 6. So I think it is exciting to see this team really pull it all together. And it is for a fact that you get guys on every line that have a motor. Mason Marchment actually stood out the most to me among all players. I thought that, not that he was ever a passenger, but I didn't think he could play that agitator plus role, meaning not just a guy that's agitating, blocking shots, but also contributing, right? Like Makachuk light. I really liked what I've seen from Marchment. And right now, Dallas post bracket, my revival bracket, I'd say if I could choose again, it would be Dallas.
Jake, on the goaltending side, this was the battle of the future Team USA here. Hellebuck versus Ottinger, and Ottinger has the advantage here if they're going to take much weight onto this. 2 goals against Game 1, 3 goals against in Game 2, 2 in Game 3, 1 in Game 4, 3 in Game 5, and just 1 in the overtime win in Game 6. And for Hellebuck, he let in 3-0 on the shutout, then 5, then 3 on the road, another shutout in Game 5, and 2 in a game, honestly, that he lost, but was a huge factor in keeping the Jets in that game to lose just 2-1. Honestly, you could say the same about Ottinger, who made a few big-time breakaway stops. Put yourself in the general manager's shoes next year for the Olympics. 1, are you taking weight out of this series or this playoffs for that matter, where Hellebuck was all kinds of up and down? So far, Ottinger has been pretty steady for Dallas. And number 2, who's your pick as you're going to have to make a decision on who the starting goaltender is?
Yeah, and these 2 goaltenders have just been so good for a number of years now. And honestly, if you're asking me to put weight in this series, like head to head, I can't. And it's really for me, goaltending is so much about the hot hand, and especially with all the nicks and bruises and like games you get banged up, like the closer you get to the Olympics, the more of a full picture you get of what a goaltender can be. And I think that's what's probably going to decide it, like towards next year. And it's really tough to say because I think Hellebuck did a really, really good job in the Four Nations face-off this year. So it was kind of like almost like an Olympics preview. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like, especially in the group stages, if they did almost a tandem of these two, and then when it got to the medal rounds, they would choose a starter. But I think if you're asking me right now, based on the information I have, it's going to be Ottinger. And that's just because I think he, like you said, he's a little bit more consistent when it comes to, you're probably going to get around 1 to 2 goals if he lets any in. Like, he's not really the type of goalie that's going to give you a 5, 6, 7 goal game, whereas Hellebuck has had a couple of those, especially in these playoffs. So it really could go either way, though. It could be complete flip the script, and we see Hellebuck. I mean, he had a Vezina caliber year this year in the regular season, and he probably is going to win that trophy. So it's tough to tell. But for me right now, I think Jake Ottinger, and not just because he's called Jake, but I think Ottinger is slightly ahead for me in this.
Time to pick our previews here, and we'll start in the East. Carolina and Florida get going today as this podcast drops on Tuesday, May 20th. It is a rematch of the 2023 Eastern Conference Final, and Florida had a 4-0 series sweep there. All of them were 1-goal games. I was lucky enough to watch the Carolina Hurricanes lose in quadruple overtime, the first of 3 Matthew Tkachuk game-winning goals in that series. They lost 4-3 in 4 overtimes to Tkachuk with 12.7 seconds left in OT4. They lost 2-1 2 nights later. Tkachuk with the overtime game winner, a 1-0 loss on the road, a 4-3 loss with Matthew Tkachuk's series-clinching game-winning goal with just 4.7 seconds left in regulation. Rod Brindamore's infamous quote, "We didn't get swept," as they lost 4 straight games in that series. The Panthers have kind of the dream LTIR cap manipulated roster, and looking at their roster depth, it's deep. Rodriguez, Barkov, Reinhart, the top line, Verhaeghe, Bennett, Tkachuk, the second line. Not much different than what they won the Stanley Cup with. Luosterainen, who is currently leading the Panthers in points off the third line, playing with Lundell and Brad Marchand, who's been the game breaker, the Leaf killer, and Greer, Nosek, Gadjevic. Our guy Nico Sturm you could throw in there as well, who has been in and out of the lineup on the fourth line there. The Hurricanes, it's Svechnikov, Aho, Jarvis on the top line, Hall, Roslovic, Stankoven on the second line, Martinook, Stahl, Carrier for the third, and Robinson, Kokiniemi, Jackson Blake, who's been a phenomenal rookie ad out of the NCAA for the Carolina Hurricanes. Guys, your thoughts looking forward to this? Do the Panthers still have it for 3 straight, or is this Carolina's time to bounce forward? Your picks to win it, your thoughts on the series. How many games is this one going?
Jake, you want to start here?
Yeah. I'm going to say that Rod Brindamore is going to break his loss streak in the Eastern Conference Finals. I think this is Carolina, and I think it's going to 7. I really do. I think this is one of those series that's going to be a tilt either way. And I think Carolina has definitely added a lot more depth pieces than they had in 2023 to kind of shoulder the load for Aho, Jarvis, and that kind of top line. And then Freddie Anderson is completely healthy, which is a rare sight to see these days. So knock on wood, hoping that he stays healthy for the entire series. But I mean, they also have Kochetkov in the wings waiting just in case. So not the worst backup option in the world. So I'm taking Carolina in 7, and I think at least 2, maybe 3 of these games are going to go to overtime. I think it's going to be who can outlast the other in the skating department. So I think that's going to be mine. And this isn't to this isn't to discount the Panthers, because I think if one thing goes their way, they could take it and run with it. They're a very opportunistic driven team. So, but yeah, I'm gonna stick with my guns. Say Carolina in 7, and sorry, Nico, you're gonna have to wait for that second Stanley Cup.
I'm thinking Florida in 6, but I do think for Carolina's young core, we talked about like the core 4, quote unquote, but for Jarvis, for Svechnikov, for Aho, I don't think this is going to be what we saw the last few appearances. Let's also acknowledge games 1 and 2, 2023 or 2024. Apologies. Or was it 23, the quadruple overtime? That was last year, right?
It was 23. Yeah.
Last year they lost to the Rangers. Also
That's
a few
right.
double overtimes in there.
Yeah, you have to factor that in, right? Quadruple overtime game 1, that zaps anybody. We saw that in the Columbus-Tampa series in the bubble, and there were other factors there too. But I do think we're going to see a different series. Tkachuk isn't on the heater he was on. It's going to take every man. I think it's going to go either 6 or 7. I do feel that Florida just seems like it feels like no one has an answer for them. And obviously, this is also coming off from the fact that they went to the Cup final twice. They won last year in Game 7, and they almost blew that. But I feel that right now it doesn't feel like there's a team that has an answer. I'm also glad to be very wrong. And if Carolina does have the answer, it's probably in their speed of play and their ability to capitalize on their chances. I mean, I think Svechnikov has been what Tkachuk was to their team a few years ago, where he was really the factor that kind of dragged everyone else into the fight. I'd like to see that from Svechnikov on the conference final stage. And I also think it's gonna require a big series from Aho, because everything's matchups and Barkov's on the other side of the face-off circle. So that'll be a treat to watch overall for hockey fans.
It's interesting looking at the stat breakdown. The stats very minutely favor the Carolina Hurricanes. When you think about special teams, Carolina #1 in the NHL, both regular season and postseason in the penalty kill. They've been dominant there. The power play slightly better in the postseason so far for Carolina. Their 5-on-5 SAT percentage is up. I think Freddie Anderson is what is the game breaker for Carolina, and they need him to be just about a Vezina caliber, Conn Smythe winning player to get past Sergei Bobrovsky and the depth of this Florida Panthers offense. But I'm going to take Florida in 6, and I'm right on with Matthew's prediction there. I think it comes down to the physicality that Florida has. The problem that I think Carolina is going to run into, what they've been able to do is dominate possession, dominate shot counts, create chaos in front of netminders. Freddie Anderson hasn't been terribly tested, although right now he's the #1 goaltender in the playoffs, a .937 save percentage, 1.3 goals against average. They need that to stay, and they also need to be able to have the exact same dominance in front of Bobrovsky, who's had some shades of shakiness throughout this playoff. I just think that Florida plays the exact same style, and Carolina hasn't had a matchup yet that they've been pressured in trailing in possession, trailing in shot count. I think Florida has the capability to do that. They're also a much more physical team than Carolina is. Looking at the regular season, they led the NHL in hits. Carolina was 30th in that stat. In the playoffs, again, Florida is first, Carolina 7th out of the 16 teams. So for that reason, unfortunately, I'm rolling with Florida. I'm going to be down there, boots on the ground, game 2, and I'm hoping that I'm way wrong here, because I'm ready to book a Stanley Cup final trip down to Raleigh once again if they happen to make it. I think Florida is kind of the team of destiny. I'm a proud card-holding member of future tickets on 3 of the 4 teams in the conference final right now. The 3 futures I put down, all 3 teams that are not the Carolina Hurricanes here. Regardless of the result, I'll be walking away happy. Time to go to the West. Dallas versus Edmonton, another conference final rematch. This time it is the 2024 Western Conference and the Edmonton Oilers, who made it to the Stanley Cup last season. 6 games for them to move on. Overtime in game 1, 3-2, the final in favor of the Oilers. The Stars were at home. They bounced back at home with a 3-1 win. The Oilers won game 3. Lost game 3, 5-3. They won 5-2 in game 4. So back-to-back splits. The Oilers then won on the road in game 5, back at home in game 6. Kind of the similar setup. Dallas, the home seed here. Where do we see the Western Conference final going? Do you guys have the same feeling I've got about the team of destiny? My bracket has Edmonton walking all the way to the Cup final.
Jake, I don't know about you. I see Dallas, the Rantanen situation. I mentioned depth as being a factor at something that I'm not convinced of with Edmonton, something that convinces me with Dallas. And I think you have to feel a little more comfortable with Ottinger and net. With all those things stated, Edmonton all year has taken those things and thrown them out the window, right? It seems like it never mattered what dysfunction was going on. They just kind of found their way. So in terms of that statement, Casey, I agree, where it's like team of destiny. It seems like Edmonton, no matter what happens, they just find their way through. But I'm taking Dallas.
Oh, we lost you, Jake.
Oh, there we go. I was going to say Dallas and how many?
Dallas, I always hope for a long series, so I'll say 6.
Okay. Well, we're getting the you alluded to Corey Perry much earlier in the show, the Corey Perry showdown here in Dallas and Edmonton. My head is saying Stars, my heart is saying Oilers. I'm going to go with my heart. I got to go with the Oilers. I need to see a Stuart Skinner Conn Smythe run. And I think, it's going to be tough for the Oilers to find as much depth as the Stars. But I think the top end of McDavid and Draisaitl just slightly outweighs Mikko Rantanen. I think the fact that you have 2 of the top 5 players in the game on the Edmonton Oilers, and Matty Leonardo would be yelling at me for this because I'm calling Connor McDavid top 5 in this season. But I think that slightly outweighs Rantanen leading the charge for the Stars. So I'm gonna say Oilers in 6. And I think it's going to go pretty similarly to that 2024 Western Conference Final. I think Edmonton kind of learned how to play Ottinger, and I'm thinking that we're going to get some good goal scoring games from both teams.
Corey Perry is due. He's never won a Stanley Cup since his first season in the NHL with the Anaheim Ducks in 2007, and he's since then made his career on losing it. Back-to-back Stanley Cup losses in 2020 and 21, and then another one, 3 straight as he lost in 2022. Followed that up by signing with the Oilers and losing it in 2024. I think it's his time. At 40 years old, he has looked probably the best he's looked since dominating as a young guy back near 2007 there. I think Connor McDavid, Leon Draisaitl, the feeling of the team being destined to do something special, it's their time. I have the Cup coming back to Canada. I think this goes the distance. I've been so pleased with some of these series, the anticipation all year round with how close the standings were. 7 games for Winnipeg, St. Louis, 7 games for Dallas and Colorado. We saw 7 in the Leafs-Panthers. This is the one that goes 7 for this round here in the conference final. and it's going to be the Oilers getting it done on the road. Maybe some overtime jazz there. I think McDavid is going to, rally his team back, and I'm rooting for that 2006 rematch, but I think it's going to be a rematch of last year's Cup final, Edmonton and Florida. Jake, let's close it off. Some PWHL coming up, and the playoffs are well underway. The championship is set with Minnesota and Ottawa. Chance for the Frost to go back-to-back here, as well as some exciting news on how the expansion is going to go down. Hit us with what you got.
Yeah, so the first Canadian team to make the Walter Cup final is a friend of the show, Stephanie Markowski, and the Ottawa Charge. So they're going to be taking on the defending champs, the Minnesota Frost, and I think Montreal, they had a really tough choice to pick their first round opponent, as it would have been tough either way, and they still lost even picking the Charge. So both series went 2-1, 2-1, and it was some really great series. I really like seeing that style of hockey being played. And just like we talked with Steph, it's always different seeing a continuation series where a lot of the girls from the NCAAs haven't really played an actual series before, where it's at 5 games set against the same opponent. Like, sure, you'll play 2 games or 3 games in a weekend, and sometimes you'll play that 3-game series in the NCAAs. But that 5-game series, it's such a different feel when you go to 5 or 7 games. And I think the experience of the Frost really showed in that first round matchup against Toronto, and I think that is probably what's going to carry them. I hate to say it, but I think that's probably what's going to carry them to another Walter Cup final. And Ottawa, I think they've gotten some really good goaltending, and I keep harping on it this episode, but Gwyneth Phillips, what a performance. Let me just pull up her stats from this playoff and just ask you guys. So on Ottawa, Gwyneth Phillips, 6 goals allowed in 4 games played, a 1.14 goals against average, and a 9.56 save percentage. That is unreal. She was so good for the Charge, and she's going to be that X factor for Ottawa in this Walter Cup final. And just to give you guys a quick preview of what this looks like, the top 3 scorers for the Charge in the postseason so far: Brianne Jenner, Emily Clark, and Aneta Terlova. Sorry if I got that wrong. But they definitely are relying more on their depth. Their top 2 scorers in Jenner and Clark only have 3 points this season, or this postseason. And looking at Minnesota, Taylor Heisey, 7 points in 4 games played, 1 goal, 6 assists. And then right behind her are Lee Steckline and Sophie Jakes, and both with 6 points in 4 games played. So really a lot of points going on for that Minnesota Frost team. So it's going to be the battle of Minnesota's offense versus Ottawa's defense, and it's going to be a really fun series to watch. I think this might be one of the first times we see a series go to 5. If not, I probably see this going to Minnesota in a shorter amount of time, but I really want to see a game 5 against these 2 teams. But we kick off Tuesday, May 20th, the day this podcast comes out, at 7 p.m. in Ottawa at TD Place, and it's going to be rocking. I think it's going to be a really good series, and of course, looking out for our Clarkson alums and Brooke McQuigg, Dom Petrie, and Steph Markowski. So hopefully they have a good series, and it's going to be a really fun one to watch. Casey, I know you're a pretty big Minnesota Frost fan. You were following them for the end of the season there. Well, do you see any impact players on either side that you want to take a look at?
I haven't watched too much of the playoffs, but ironically, this is the matchup I've watched all season long, just based on correlation of Clarkson alumni and location towards Clarkson. It's an hour and 15-minute drive to go up there. So I've seen Ottawa and Minnesota play 4 times this year, and Brooke McQuigg made a lot of noise this round and got a headline on Jocks and Jills, which was pretty cool. Jake, a close friend of both of ours. But I think Minnesota has a lot more star power than Ottawa, and Ottawa traded away Renata Fost, which I think could be a hit on the defensive end. I think it comes down to whether or not the goaltending is going to hold up for Minnesota through the regular season. Same thing we talked about last episode, a little bit on the shaky side at times, where they went from being the top team in the standings to being a team that had to win out to make it into the playoffs. They did that. Now they're in the championship. So maybe the heat rides with Minnesota, but certainly, excited to follow some close friends throughout that series. And Jake, as we close it off here, the exciting news that maybe could follow a couple of these players, McQuigg, who's been making some noise, has proven herself as a key penalty killer, playing some power play time, might be one of the faces we see moved as the expansion draft comes near.
Yeah, and again, Steph Markowski might be part of that, as well as her and McQuigg have ironically led all ECAC alumni in hits this playoff. I think they have 8 hits, both of them, which isn't a surprise to us.
One thing that is maybe the coolest part about the new league is that hits is a stat they keep, and I hope that becomes something in the NCAA, Jake. Sorry to butt in.
No, I get it.
That's something that I absolutely love when they throw it up in the intermission, that hits is one of the major stats counted in women's hockey now.
I know, and it's exactly what Brooke and Steph are made for. I mean, both of them very good defensive players, and I mean, if we didn't see one of them in the penalty box while we were calling a game, it was a miracle. So glad that they're not getting penalized for that anymore, for throwing the body and doing what they do best.
The all-time hits leader at Clarkson University, Brooke McQuigg.
Yeah, and hopefully that continues, and who knows, maybe somewhat like a Selke trophy looking for Brooke McQuigg. But yeah, so Seattle and Vancouver, the two newest PWHL franchises, are set for the PWHL expansion draft. And here's some of the key information. So each team of the original 6 gets to protect 3 players, and those 3 players cannot be selected on expansion draft day. So a lot of players being available for these two teams to pick, in kind of contrast to the NHL, where I think it was something like 12 or 14 that were protected when Seattle and Vegas both did their expansion drafts. So lots of differences between these two. So those player protection lists are due June 3rd at noon. And then the exclusive signing window will open on June 4th at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So this is where both of those teams can sign a maximum of 5 players. So if anyone has their contract rights, so we were talking to Steph last week about how her rights are owned by the Charge, but she doesn't have a contract for next year. So she would be eligible to sign for one of these teams if they approached her. So similar to that, they can select 5 of those and sign them to contracts before the expansion draft. And then that window closes June 8th at 5 p.m. Then on June 9th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, that's when the expansion draft will take place. And both teams will have to have a 12-player roster by then. So if they sign 5, they can only draft 7. But if they only sign 2, they can draft 12 or 10. So as long as those numbers get up to 12, both teams will be good. But so that'll be June 9th. And then June 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern time, that's going to be the prospect draft. So the PWHL draft, where the New York Sirens will select first overall once again. So last year they got Claire Thompson at number 1. And it's kind of a debate, Casey, where coming into the season, there was a couple different ones selected for first overall, one of them being Abby Murphy, who has decided to return to the University of Minnesota, which I'm sure Mr. Leonardo is very happy about. But it's going to be interesting to see who's going to be up there. I mean, there's names that we definitely know from ECAC hockey, such as Kalti Kaltenkova up there, Nicole Gosling, Haley Wynn, Rory Gilday, Michaela Paislova actually in the running as a Clarkson alumni. And then people like Kendall Cooper, who played for Quinnipiac, Abby Hustler from St. Lawrence, and Cherkowski. So a lot of different names up there for those top 8 picks now. And it's going to be interesting to see. But that's kind of the gist of the PWHL upcoming. Last kind of thoughts for you, Casey, or even Matt, if you have any thoughts on the upcoming drafts, on the upcoming prospect drafts, and what you'd like to see out of the PWHL coming forward.
No, it's exciting. I think it's great. I think it's great that there's expansion, and I think what they've done uniquely is create a little bit of a different game. It's not copy and paste of what the NHL is. Even the way they're going about the expansion draft, prospect draft, the way they've gone about the penalty kill situation, I've enjoyed seeing those differences, and I look forward to keeping up with it a little bit more now that I'm a lot more well versed in the college hockey women's side of the game. So you see those players get to the next level, and you guys were name dropping some players that we saw in the ECAC, but overall the college hockey game's really grown as well in their talent. So the game's only getting better.
I was going to joke how Matthew's going to be very familiar as he's now turned Bobcat into engineer here in ECAC, lifelonger at this point in both of our careers, as it's been a green and gold show. Jake and I highlighting a lot of Clarkson names. I'm wearing the forbidden color right now, but I'm going to go up to the prospect draft and hoping that a couple of those Clarkson names are going to go right up there in the first 4. Haley Wynn and Nicole Gosling. I think Rory Gilday is going to be sought after. Carlton Kovacic is a name I'm really interested to see. Her. She's been a little bit divisive at times in her career, but I think is made for this league with the hitting, the physicality that she brings. I think is kind of the perfect setup for this league. Let's tie a bow on it here, gentlemen, and as we look forward to the championship of the PWHL, the conference finals, and soon to be Stanley Cup championship. What's on the docket personally for you guys for the upcoming week or weeks?
Well, baseball season is in full swing. I've got my first doubleheader playing on the Sunday before Memorial Day. And then 2 days later, I have my first game coaching this season. I'm coaching a 15U travel team, or assistant coaching at least. So lots of baseball going on, and we'll see how that goes. Hopefully my body holds up. But you might be hearing about how much I hurt after this weekend. So,
Casey, you can imagine it's been a long summer. I'll be keeping up. I enjoy Major League Baseball. I'm a Yankees guy, all New York. So apologies, folks, if that rubs anyone the wrong way. I know there's a reputation that precedes New York sports, but yeah. Otherwise, obviously, Memorial Day is great. And just working the 7,000 part-time gigs we got going on. That's what is going on in this corner of the squares. But Casey, what about you? You seem like your nights are going to be pretty busy for the next week or so.
I got a big week coming on, and that's the reason I'm representing the forbidden color of red. The few articles of red in my closet are all Carolina Hurricanes related, but heading down to Raleigh. That's right, Jake. At least one of us is bleeding green and gold here. But no, heading down to Raleigh, game 2. Hopefully meet up with a couple alumni. Friend of the show, Eric Cole's going to be down there, I know, and Nico Sturm hopefully can crack into the lineup, but just shot him a text earlier today, and hopefully catch up with him as well. The one Florida Panther I won't mind seeing find the back of that. I got to be honest, I am a massive Brad Marchand fan, though, and I'm excited to see him for the Panthers. Fingers crossed. Carolina has a little bit better fate than I'm predicting. I would love to go to a cup final game down there, but this is I believe, 5th straight year. My buddy and I have hopped in the car and road tripped it down 13 hours from Rochester, New York, and kind of turned into a fun tradition. We had our tickets set for Game 6 against the Capitals, and I was pretty excited to see Ovechkin that one obviously didn't pan out too well. So had to push it back a few days and going down to see the Panthers. I've seen 3 Florida Panthers games, 2 of them, and this being the third upcoming. Fortunately, it's game 2, so the fate of what happened in the first 2 can't happen. We've seen the Panthers knock the Hurricanes out 2 times. We've been of the 4 games we've went to, the Rangers game was the only one of the 4 so far that the Canes have not been eliminated from the playoffs. Tampa beat them in 4. Vasilevsky shut them out 2-0. And back-to-back Panthers eliminations as well as a Rangers win. So haven't had too much success on the road. And if you're a betting person, might be time to throw some money on the Panthers in game 2, but fingers crossed. Gentlemen, always a pleasure to hop on here. We'll try to do it again in a week or so as the playoffs roll on, and a lot to watch, a lot of hockey as it's starting to wind down. It's getting to be a tough time right now, plenty to enjoy. In about a month's time, I'm not sure what I'm going to be doing. Not a huge baseball fan, so it's the time where I absolutely run out of things to do for a couple of months. And planning things to talk about on this podcast is going to be about the highlight of it. But until then, make sure to like, follow, subscribe. We've got it on YouTube and Spotify at Fifth Liners Pod. You can catch us on Twitter and Instagram, the same handle, and on TikTok at Fifth Line Pod. Follow, like, subscribe. Big help to our show. We have content coming out daily here throughout the playoffs, and starting in this round, we'll be following very closely as Matt's Rangers sit at home and hopefully watch the Carolina Hurricanes from inside the Metro move on. For Matthew Mugno, Jake Swanson, I'm Casey Ditzel. Until next time, have a good one, everybody.